I'd like to start by welcoming everyone to this event. The artist and freedom fighter and revolutionary Paul Robeson, the anti-colonial and black freedom movements. My name is Jahan Chaudhry. I'm a member of the Saturday Free School, and the Saturday Free School is very happy to present this event to you as part of our year-long celebration of the 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. And we see Paul Robeson as a very important figure in this celebration of anti-colonialism and its relationship to the black freedom movement. We're very happy to bring this event to you with the Paul Robeson House. We'd like to thank the staff of the Paul Robeson House for hosting us here. And we're also very happy to present this event and other events throughout the year for free to the people of Philadelphia. So if you would like to support us, please visit the table at the back, where we have some t-shirts for sale. We have a beautifully designed t-shirt by one of our free school members, Serafina Harris, which is a tribute to Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And we have another t-shirt featuring the great James Baldwin as well. Both are on sale for $15. So that's the best way to show your support. And we're also very happy to accept donations. So without further ado, we'll get to the first part of our program, which will be playing of Paul Robeson's testimony before the House Un-American Activities Committee, which was on June 12, 1956. This was done at the height of the period known as McCarthyism, in which Senator McCarthy and others in the government were persecuting communists and those associated with the Communist Party. Robeson was called up before this committee both because of his close association to the Communist Party of the United States, as well as his outspoken views and activism on issues of racial justice and world peace.
You now member of the Communist Party. Oh, please. Is that the way, Mr. Robeson? What is the Communist Party? What do you mean by that? Are you now a member of the Communist Party? Would you like to come to the ballot box where I move and take off the ballot and see? Mr. Chairman, I respectfully suggest whether this be directed to answer the question. You are directed to answer the question. I invoke the Fifth Amendment and vote yes. I respectfully suggest the witness be directed to answer the question whether, if he gave us a truthful answer, he would be supplying information which might be used against him in a criminal proceeding. You are directed to answer, Mr. Robeson. In the first place, where I've been in the world, the first to die in the struggle against fascism were the communists. I laid many wreaths upon the graves of communists. That is not criminal. Chief Justice Warren is very clear that the Fifth Amendment does not have anything to do with the inverse of criminality. I invoke the Fifth Amendment. Have you ever been known under the name of John Thomas? Does somebody here want me to put up a perjury someplace? John Thomas, my name is Paul. And anything I have to say, I have said in public all over the world, and that is why I'm here today. Mr. Chairman, I ask you to direct the witness to answer the question he's making. I ask you to affirm or deny the fact that your Communist Party name is John Thomas. The witness talks very loud when he makes a speech, so when he looks at the Fifth Amendment, I can't hear him. I have medals for diction. I can talk a little. We talk a little louder. I invoke the Fifth Amendment loudly. Sir, who are Mr. and Mrs. Vladimir? Yes, the Fifth Amendment. Do you know a Manning Johnson? I invoke the Fifth Amendment. Do you know Gregory Kifitz? I invoke the Fifth Amendment. Do you know a Max Jurgen? I invoke the Fifth Amendment. Max Jurgen, why don't you tell people here to be cross-examined? Could I ask whether this is legal? This is not only legal, but here you are. By unanimous vote, this committee has been instructed to perform this very distasteful task. Woman, I vote. You're thinking of the chairman of the committee. Mr. Walter? Yes. The Pennsylvania Walter? That is right. Representative of the steel workers? That is right. And the coal mining workers? That is right. United States Steel, by any chance? Oh, wait, Patriot? That is right. You know, all the bills that are going to keep all kinds of decent people out of the country. No, only your kind. Other people like myself. And you would let in the Teutonic Anglo-Saxon stock. We are trying to make it easier to get rid of your kind, too. You don't want any colored people to come in. Could I be allowed to read some of my statements? Will you just tell this committee, please, while under oath, Mr. Robeson, the communists who participated in the preparation of that statement?
Oh, please. The reason I'm here today, from the mouth of the big plot itself, is I shall not be allowed to travel because I have struggled for the independence of the colonial peoples of Africa. The other reason I'm here today, again, from the State Department and the record of the World of Peace, is that when I am abroad, I speak out against injustices against the equal people in this land. That is why I'm here. I'm not being tried for what I'm a communist. I'm being tried for fighting for the rights of my people. We're still second-class citizens in this country, in this United States of America. My mother was born in your state. My mother was a Quaker. My ancestors in the time of Washington, they bred for George Washington's troops when they crossed Delaware. My father was a slave. I stand here struggling for the rights of my people, full citizens in this country. We are not. We are not in Mississippi. We are not in Montgomery, Alabama. We are not in Washington. They are nowhere. And that is why I'm here today. I want to shut up every Negro who has the courage to stand up and fight for the rights of his people. The rights of workers, and I have been on many a picket line for the steel workers too. And that is why I'm here today.
Will you tell us whether or not you know Thomas W. Young? Thomas W. Young is a Negro president of the Guide Publishing Company. I'd like to read you his testimony, quote, Paul Robeson has no moral right to place in jeopardy the welfare of the American Negro to advance a foreign cause. In the eyes of the Negro people, this false prophet is unfaithful to their country, and they repudiate him, close quote. Do you know the man that said that?
I invoke the victim and his death. Can I read my statement? It is a sad and bitter company.
While you were in Paris in 1949, Mr. Robeson, did you tell an audience the American Negro would never go to war against the Soviet Union?
May I say that is slightly out of context? May I explain to you what I did say? I remember the speech very well. 2,000 students came from a population that would range 600 or 700 million people asked me to say in their name that they did not want war. No part of my speech in Paris says 15 million American Negroes would do anything. I said it was my feeling that the American people would struggle for peace, and that has been since underscored by the President of these United States. Now, in passing, I said,
Do you know any people who want war?
listen to me. I said it was unthinkable to me that any people could take up arms in the name of a man like Senator Eastman of Mississippi against everybody. Gentlemen, I still say that this United States government should go to Mississippi and protect my people. That is what should.
I lay before you, sir, an article. Quote, I am looking for full freedom, unquote, by Paul Robeson in The Worker. July 3rd, 1949, quote, I said it was unthinkable that the Negro people of America or elsewhere could be drawn into war with the Soviet Union. I repeat it with 100-fold emphasis, they will not, close quote.
And gentlemen, they have not. It is clear that no Americans are going to go to war with the Soviet Union.
While you were in Stockholm, did you make a little speech?
I made all kinds of speeches.
Let me read you a quote here. Let me listen. Do so, please.
I am a lawyer.
It would be a revelation if you would listen to counsel.
In good company, I usually listen. But you know, people wander around in such fancy places.
You said, Mr. Robeson, and I quote, I belong to the American resistance movement, which fights against American imperialism, just as the resistance movement fought against Hitler.
Just like those that Douglas and Harriet Tubman were underground railroaders and fighting for our freedom, you bet your life.
I have to insist that you listen to these questions.
I am listening.
I quote further, why should the Negroes ever fight against the only nation of the world where racial discrimination is prohibited and where the people can live freely? Never. They will never fight against either the Soviet Union or the people's democracies, close quote. Did you make that statement?
I do not remember, but what is perfectly clear today is that 900 million people, other colored people, have told you they will not. 400 million in India, and it is everywhere, have told you
That
that.
is the question. He doesn't need to make a speech. Did you write an article that was published in the USSR Information Bulletin? Quote, I want to emphasize that only here in the Soviet Union did I feel that I was a real man with a capital M, close
I understand. I'm a bass singer, so to me, it was Chorok, the great Russian bass, not Cruise with the tenor. I learned the Russian language to sing their songs. I wish you would listen now.
Mr. Chairman, I ask you to direct the witness to answer the question.
Just be fair.
I ask for order.
The great poet of Russia is an African black.
Let us not go too far. Let me
Explain this.
Did you make that statement?
When I first went to Russia in 1934,
Did you make that
when I first went to Russia in
Did you make that
1934,
statement?
in Russia, I felt for the first time like a full human being. No color prejudice like in Mississippi, no color prejudice like in Washington. It was the first time I felt like a human being. Where I did not feel the pressure of color as I feel it in this community today. Why did I stay in Russia? Because my father was a slave. My people died to build this country. And I want to stay here and have a part of it just like you. And no fascist-minded people will drive me from it. Is that clear?
You are here because you are promoting the communist cause.
I am here because I am opposing the neo-fascist cause, which I see rising in these committees. Jefferson could be sitting here, and Frederick Douglass could be sitting here. Eugene Debs could be sitting here.
Now, what prejudice are you talking about? You were graduated from Rutgers. You were graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. I remember seeing you play football in Lehigh. There was no prejudice against you.
Just a moment. This is something I challenge very deeply. That the success of a few Negroes can make up for $700 a year for thousands of Negro families in the South. My father was a slave. I have cousins who are sharecroppers. I do not see success in terms of myself. I have sacrificed hundreds of thousands of dollars for what I believe in.
While you were in Moscow, Mr. Robeson, did you make a speech lobbying Stalin?
I got remember.
Have you recently changed the mind about Stalin?
Stalin, gentlemen, is a question for the Soviet Union, and I want to talk to the representative of the people who are building America. Wasted the lives of my people. You are responsible, you and your forebears, for 60 to 100 million black people dying in slave ships and on the plantations. Don't you ask me about anybody.
I'm sure you wouldn't want to discuss with us the slave labor camps in the
Nobody
Soviet
knows
Union.
more on slavery than this society, I assure you.
I would invite your attention to the Daily Worker of June 29, 1949, with reference to a get-together with you and Ben Davis, formerly communist councilman in New York. Do you know Ben
One of
Davis?
my dearest friends, he is as patriotic in America as can be, and you, gentlemen, are the non-patriots.
Just a minute.
Are the un-American.
The hearing is now adjourned. I can do a little bit I can.
I must say, but now,
The meeting is adjourned.
it should be.
So, for those coming in, there are 1, 2, 3 seats up. So I hope you enjoyed that reenactment of the House Un-American Activities Committee hearing, which had the actor James Earl Jones in the role of Paul Robeson. One thing you may have noticed is he mentioned about how the colored people of the world, the millions of colored people of the world, are not willing to go to war, and certainly not willing to go to war against the Soviet Union. One of the countries he mentioned by name was India, which is very fitting with his life because he was very deeply involved in solidarity with the Indian anti-colonial movement. This hearing happened not long after India's independence, within a decade, and it would be soon after this that Martin Luther King himself would travel to India, a trip which he recounted in his famous essay, My Trip to the Land of Gandhi. And in that spirit, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Meghna Chandra, member of the Saturday Free School, who will be giving an official introduction to this event, as well as talking about her own trip to the land of Gandhi, which she recently completed.
Hi. Hello. Hello. Hi. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the artist as freedom fighter and revolutionary, Paul Robeson, the anti-colonial and Black freedom movements. This is the second conference in the 2019 year of Gandhi. a year celebrating the life and legacy of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi for our times. I would like to open this conference with a few reflections from my recent trip to India that are relevant to the themes we will discuss today. Seeing India through the lens of the Black freedom struggle and through thinkers like Paul Robeson helped me see the East, not just as a geographical entity, but as an alternative to the racism, materialism, and militarism of Western civilization. I would like to begin with a quote by Paul Robeson, whom we celebrate today. The whole problem of living can never be understood until the world recognizes that artists are not a race apart. Every man has some element of the artist in him, and if this is pulled up by the roots, he becomes suicidal and dies. In the East, this quality has never been damaged. To that is traceable the virility of most Eastern peoples. In the West, it remains healthy and active only amongst those sections of the community which have never fully subscribed to the Western values, that is, the exploited sections, plus some rebels from the bourgeoisie. For the rest, mathematical thinking has made them so intellectualized, so detached and self-conscious, that it has tended to kill this creative emotional side. As Robeson says, each human being has creative capabilities which cannot be separated from humanity. Western civilization has destroyed the artist and the human by putting rationality and materialism over creativity and feeling. In order to produce great art and make humanity complete, one has to reject Western values and identify with something else. In my trip to India, for the first time, I saw a great vitality in the people. The great Indian poet and freedom fighter, Rabindranath Tagore said, "Civilization is the expression of some guiding moral force which we have evolved in our society for the object of attaining perfection, a goal which is constantly evolving as man, a complex being, transcends himself." In India, I saw a people guided by moral rather than material considerations. I saw in their art expressions of universal truths that they had learned over the centuries about how to relate to each other and to the divine. The Bal singers of West Bengal is one example of the spiritual strivings of my people for truth. I met them in Shantiniketan, which is the ancestral home of Rabindranath Tagore. Bal singers wander the countryside and live in poverty on the fringes of society as outcasts. Their music blends lessons from Sufi Islam, radical sects of Hinduism, and Buddhism. Through their music, they teach about the power of love to free us from our worldly attachments by helping us see the truth, that we will all die one day, and only in surrender to love do we find relief from life's sorrows and a reason for living. In a song that they sang for me, Kachad Vitor Ochin Paki, Kemne Ashe Chai, the Bal singer says that our souls are like birds in cages, which are like our bodies. We do not know when the bird will fly away. Our mind is deluding itself by being imprisoned in the cage, which will fall apart as soon as the bird leaves from it. The Bal singer I met, who also became my teacher, Basudev Bal, lived in a small house with his family. The shrine to Shiva, in which he practiced and taught, was bigger and grander than his house. After he performed for me, he asked me only to give whatever I felt like giving, and if I didn't give anything, that was all right too. In exchange for a song that I sang for him, he taught me 2 beautiful songs about the love of Radha and Krishna. I found out later that Basudev Bal is a world-renowned singer and is sung in many different countries. Though he has offers to live all over the world, he said that nothing could persuade him to leave the river Kopai, which was the source of all his inspiration. Basudev Bal reminded me of Lao Tzu. He quickens but owns not. He acts but claims not. Merit he accomplishes but dwells not in it. Since he does not dwell on it, it will never leave him. That which is outside ourselves we can sell. but that which is one with our life, we cannot. When I told people I met in my travels about our efforts with the Year of Gandhi to spread the message of peace, to remember the history of the anti-colonial struggle, they offered me nothing but encouragement. They said that figures like Gandhi, Nehru, Bose, and Maulana Azad were truly great because they sacrificed their own lives to free us from British rule and founded our nation, but that not one leader today can measure up to their moral example. Unfortunately, this assessment of the anti-colonial struggle was not shared by many members of the English-speaking intellectual class. In the wake of the election of 2019, which saw the re-election of Narendra Modi, many of them declared that India and its people were hopelessly prejudiced and backwards. When they saw India, they saw first and foremost its contradictions. I think we see this in their rejection of Mahatma Gandhi. For example, I was speaking to a young student leader about the gap between the intellectuals and the masses of people who have historically been at the forefront of movements for peace and justice in India and who have stood in solidarity with freedom struggles all over the world, from Vietnam to Palestine to anti-colonial struggles in Africa. She agreed with me. I asked her what she thought of Gandhi. She instantly wrinkled her nose and said, though she grew up liking Gandhi, she now hated him. She said that she found out about his problematic behaviors at various times in his life and could no longer support him. I asked her why, despite being problematic, he was able to unite millions of people, most of them poor peasants, into a nonviolent movement for freedom. It occurred to me that in many ways, the intellectual class has adopted a Western approach to their own civilization, detaching themselves from it as an object of academic study, rather than being a part of it, and striving to build on the past to work towards perfection, as our ancestors have been doing for centuries. After all, Gandhi did what no one today has been able to do. He won the trust of the people. He did this not by appealing to their rational minds with politically correct arguments, but to their lived traditions and to their hearts, and finding the creative potential deep within each of them. As Tagore said, he stopped at the threshold of huts of thousands of dispossessed, like one of their own. He spoke in their own language. Here was living truth at last, not quotations from a book. For this, Mahatma, the name given to him by the people of India, is his real name. Mahatma means great soul. Maha is great, Atma is soul. The Black radical tradition and the anti-colonial struggle has taught me that those who would take responsibility for the future must see what is in front of their eyes, the greatness of the East. This means understanding that the fate of India lies not in time spans of an election cycle, but in millennia. It means recognizing the greatness of our own intellectual and spiritual traditions. It means learning from the people, rather than thinking we have everything to teach them. In the United States, people are no longer identifying with Western civilization, by which I mean a regime of racism, militarism, and materialism. We see this in the election of Donald Trump, who, for all his contradictions, and there are many, speaks the truth about American empire and the need to end America's role as policeman of the world. We see this in the candidacy of Tulsi Gabbard and Marianne Williamson, who speak for the demilitarization of the United States economy and for healing our racially divided society through reparations for the Black community. Both in India and the United States, people who are concerned with the future of humanity must do what Paul Robeson, Howard Thurman, Alice and John Coltrane, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, and Rabindranath Tagore did: look to the East. When we reject the West and return to the basic moral principles that shape human civilization, we can all become artists who can create a world worthy of humanity. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I hope you will enjoy this conference and stay with us throughout this process of studying, understanding, and transforming ourselves and each other.
Okay, now we will move on to our first panel entitled Civilization, Freedom, and Art, like to call the panelists up to these chairs, Serafina, Emily, and Radesh. And we'd like to call the moderator, Sammy Chomsky, to the podium.
I'm a little congested. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm very pleased to introduce our next three speakers, Serafina Harris, Emily Dong, and Radesh Kekia, who will present their ideas on freedom, civilization, and arts. Their panel seeks not only to define these concepts, but to discuss the relationship between them, and introduce us to some thoughts and thinkers who have found freedom, civilization, and arts throughout history. Honoring the theme of our event today, Serafina, Emily, and Radesh's words continue the tradition of the broader anti-colonial movement. Our first speaker, Serafina Harris, is a Temple student born in Philadelphia and a committed member of the Free School. She will discuss the concept of civilization through the lens of Glimpses of World History, a collection of letters written from prison by anti-colonial leader Nehru before he became the first Prime Minister of independent India. Serafina will also talk about freedom as it relates to the artist's search for truth and the beauty of humanity. Our next speaker, Emily Dong, is from Boston. She recently graduated from Cornell, where she and a group of students read Gracie Boggs' and W.E.B. Du Bois, bringing her to the Free School. Emily will discuss art, culture, and civilization, drawing mainly from W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson, and Mao Zedong. Finally, Radesh Kekia is a physics researcher in Boston who has been a persistent visitor of the Free School for the last several months. He will focus on freedom, drawing on the work of James Baldwin, Gandhi, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Paul Robeson. So we'll begin with Serafina.
Hello. The study of men and women who have come before is not solely to issue out dates and become a fountain of information to dictate, but it must result in the principled trust and peace for the well-living of humanity. This centers education for the development for people to live on the right side of history, in which its converse asserts there is a current path that humanity is headed. I want to be on the side of love. In this, questions arise concerning the well-being of people and the capacity for life itself. On what basis do we live, and what truth do we tell our children? What are the moral foundations and systematic ways have people live as exemplar to live, to develop our thinking, and as well as developing the ways of living? What makes of man, woman, and civilized behavior and community life? Further, in order to ask such questions, there must be an analysis upon the world in which we do live. Our current lives are surrounded by the decay and stagnancy of a collapsing Western civilization in which music sedates the soul of people and our energetic pulse. Technology has taken over time for meditative thought, and where Black people in this country have become isolated from a world in which a movement towards freedom has taken place and has yet to continue. Distractions of Western capitalism and its failing moral mask raise children in a fog of addictions, disregard for life, and a lack of inquiry of ethic. Through the search for whiteness, do young people face a deadpan of truth? But we can't deny that life subsists where the spirit is adamant.
The Black foundation of this white country are still in search for freedom. We must continue the search, and by doing so, look at our neighbors of India, Cambodia, China, Vietnam, and Africa for the mutual synthesis of philosophical endeavors towards human freedom. This will show that we are far from being trapped by a small portion of Asia. We look to the Indian struggle for independence because of its independence from the British and the ongoing struggle for freedom from colonialism. We look to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, a man of innovation and a sense of right, and thus the search for truth. His learnings were that upon the teachings of Rabindranath Tagore, the Mahatma Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the Buddha, and the people of India. And in turn, he centered the principle of peace upon the ongoing development of a common humanity. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru joined in the struggle for India's independence, starting with the non-cooperation movement. This movement was founded in the principles of ahimsa, or nonviolence, and satyagraha, or the steadfast adherence to truth, which the fight for independence of India was in turn the fight for peace. And these principles unified the morally exploited poor and laborious India upon passive resistance and non-cooperation with the British government from 1920 until 1922. During this period, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru got arrested on charges of anti-governmental activities, and when released a few months later, loyal to Gandhi, you can still hear me in the back? Yeah, all right. Loyal to Gandhi,
Louder.
he became Allahabad Congress Committee President, and a year later in 1923. By the age of 40, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was elected President of Congress, and through the Lahore Conference declared the goal of complete freedom for India. This helped lead to the civil disobedience movement and directly defying British laws, whereby Nehru was arrested in 1930, which turned to be his longest time in prison. When released from prison, he formed a socialist party insistent on certain and immediate freedom for India. By the time of the Cold War, there was a decisive movement in which India turns to communism or that of capitalist America. He provides the third option of the, quote, non-aligned movement, unquote, based on the foundational and principal disagreement with both communism and capitalism, where he states, quote, honorable members laid great stress on moral force. It is with military force that we are dealing with now. But I submit that moral force counts, and the moral force of Asia and Africa must, in spite of the atomic and hydrogen bombs of Russia, the USA, or another country, count. Many members present here do not obviously accept the communist ideology, while some of them do. For my part, I do not. I am a positive person, not an anti-person. I want a positive peace for my country and the world. Similarly, during Pandit Nehru's stay in prison, from 1930 to 33, he writes a now compiled host of letters to his daughter Indira Gandhi that describes the various creations and developments of life worlds in each civilization of the East and Western Asia. He writes of India, China, Cambodia, and Laos, their various shifting dynasties and cultural rises and declines. For this presentation, I want to specify what Nehru wrote of Europe to define not only the collapse of its civilization, or as poet Tagore spoke of during the European War, saw the war as a logical consequence of the development of Europe's rapacious civilization rushing to its merited doom. Pandit Nehru writes, the Roman Empire was largely a Mediterranean empire and never went beyond Mesopotamia in the east. There are bigger and more powerful and more cultural states in China and India from time to time. Nonetheless, so far as the Western world was concerned, Rome was the sole empire, and as such, represented a kind of world empire to the ancients. It had tremendous prestige. The most wonderful thing about Rome is this idea behind it. The idea of world domination, of the headship of the world. Even when Rome fell, the idea protected it and gave it strength. And the idea persisted even when it was cut off completely from Rome itself. So much so that the empire itself vanished and became a phantom, but the idea remained. In reference to Rome's influence upon Europe, he writes, "Indeed, Roman civilization seems to have been in many respects a pale shadow of the previous Hellenic civilization. In one thing, Romans are supposed to have given a great lead. This is law. Even now, lawyers in the West have to learn Roman law, as it is said to be the foundation of a great deal of law in Europe." And to continue, after describing the route that led Rome to cease, he writes, "This phantom Holy Roman Empire carried on in Maine at least for 1,000 years, and it was only a little over 100 years ago, in Napoleon's time, that it finally ended. The end was not very remarkable or dramatic. Indeed, few people must have noticed it, as in reality, it had not existed for a long time. But the host was laid at last, though not finally, for it rose up again in different guises as Caesars and Tsars and the like. Most of these were laid to rest during the Great War, which ended 14 years ago." Yet for me, this criticism doesn't answer my entire question. So what if the Roman Empire was not living to its full potentiality? How did Greece, Rome, and Europe fall in a span of 300 to 500 years? This civilization did not solely cultivate a type of greed and selfishness in its people and struggles of its merchants and poor. It was also the role that the Roman and Greek civilization had in the thought of Europe itself. And within that, it is not great upon itself, for Rome and Greece learned from Africa. Europe, furthermore, continues to leech up Asia and Africa for its dominance and survival. Dr. W.B. Du Bois writes in The World in Africa, "This is not to say that all European civilization is oppression, theft, and hypocrisy. There has been evidence of selfless religious faith, of philanthropic effort for social uplift, of individual honesty and sacrifice. But this, far from answering the indictment I have made, shows even more clearly the moral plight of present European culture and what capitalist investment and imperialism had done to it. Because of the stretch of time and space between the deed and the result, because of the work and the product, it is not only usually impossible for the worker to know the consumer or the investor, the source of his profit, but also it is often made impossible by law to inquire into the facts. Moral judgment of the industrial process is therefore difficult, and the crime is more often a matter of ignorance rather than a deliberate murder and theft. But ignorance is a colossal crime in itself. When a culture consists to any economic result, no matter how monstrous its cause, rather than demand the facts concerning work, wages, and the conditions of life, whose results may make the life of the consumer comfortable, pleasant, and even luxurious, is an indication of a collapsing civilization. Our current question now becomes, how do we live, and how can our children live? What is the way to oneness, and how can life be sustained? Further, what is the basis of life which allows itself to flourish? Is it that of the denial of humanity and the use of our brothers and sisters? Or must it be of principled regard of life and thus to live in harmonious truth of a unified humanity? What is the search for truth besides that which since urges humanity to flourish? Life cannot sustain in poverty, and it does not flourish in war. If countries are warring amongst the world, then the skies will darken and will be full of soup. If we cannot reach for the highest attainment of truth, it is as if we cannot see the sun. Similarly, if we walk with our heads low, all we will see is a shadow of our gait and have more tendencies of tripping and backward movement. We thus must not ignore the natural functioning of life in pursuit of personal greed, for conflict occurs upon misunderstandings and jealousy. Patrice Lumumba advised us to borrow from Western civilization what is good and beautiful and reject what is not suitable for us. This amalgam of African and European civilization will give Africa a civilization of new type, an authentic civilization corresponding to African realities. Efforts must also be made to free our people psychologically, unquote. Black people have created an historical sequence birthed from slavery and from childhood strove for the truth and humanity of white people. Seen in the so-called contradictions of Christianity and embrace brotherhood and sisterhood, to making music when the heart is burdened by the weight of a suicidal country. In learning to be brothers and sisters as human nature will show, poet Tagore states, of the faith in cooperation as the cure of individual and national poverty, where cooperation can convert our individual weakness into political strength, whereby declaring that our political subject was merely an outward expression of inner weakness. And what is this inner weakness within America today? Dr. Martin Luther King states, God, who has given us minds for thinking and bodies for working, would defeat his own purpose if he permitted us to obtain through prayer what may come through work and intelligence. Prayer is marvelous and necessary supplement for our feeble efforts, but it is a dangerous substitute. When Moses strove to lead the Israelites to the promised land, God made it clear that he would not do or them what they would do for themselves. And the Lord said unto Moses, wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel, that they go forward. We must pray earnestly for peace, but we must also work vigorously for the disarmament of suspension of weapon testing. We must use our minds as rigorously to plan for peace as we have used them to plan for war. We must pray with unceasing passion for racial justice, but we must also use our minds to develop a program, organize ourselves into mass nonviolent action, and employ every resource of our bodies and souls to bring the end to racial injustice. We must pray unrelentingly for economic justice, but we must also work diligently to bring into being the social changes that make for a better distribution of wealth within our nation and the undeveloped countries of the world. Thus, we cannot say one thing and do another. We have less time to become small-minded and selfish when our country must eat properly, white or black. For in this cosmic synthesis, we face ourselves and who we must become, and therefore calls sisterhood and brotherhood that starts an understanding of the self in its time and place as well as our neighbors. This will garner the strength for the responsibility to strive for a positive building of a whole and balanced humanity. Thus, the guide to freedom and for humanity is sought through the voice of truth, where Gandhi was asked, but the artist claimed to see and to find truth through outward beauty. Is it possible to see and find truth in that way? And he responded, I would reverse the order. Gandhiji immediately answered, I see and find beauty in truth and through truth. All truths, not merely true ideas, but truthful faces, truthful pictures or songs are highly beautiful. People generally fail to see beauty in truth. The ordinary man runs away from it and becomes blind to the beauty in it. Whenever men begin to see the beauty in truth, then true art will arise. Thank you.
Does this work? This perfect?
Put it, yeah.
Okay. I have That's okay? Okay. Good evening. I'm really happy to be here with all of you today at the Paul Robeson House, and I feel very honored to talk alongside two comrades who I've grown so much with throughout the past year. I want to speak openly as a young person searching to understand what today's world and what humanity demands of us. And I think art, culture, and civilization are a significant part of answering this question. I believe this question and the exemplar of not just Robeson's art, but the way he lived, are more than ever what we have to talk about. And what kind of culture is raising young people today? What the popular art of our civilization reflects of its morals, and what kind of art can build a new world of higher, fulfilled living that people fully deserve. In The World in Africa, W.E.B. Du Bois is key evidence of a damned Western civilization. The proof he expects scholars to dismiss as unscientific is the degraded, spiritually empty culture holding Europe together. The artistic peak of European culture and thus the achievement of the world is Beethoven, a man with a serious scowl and a tuxedo who runs onto a harshly lit up stage to whip his arms around and direct some uptight cellos and violins. Or maybe he'll play a lonely piano at the center. Hundreds of people dressed in gowns stay trapped in their seats, listening with such silence and ignorance of each other that they don't even dare to breathe. Beethoven's music is impressive, but it doesn't need to bring people together, but instead is meant to alienate people from each other. The great Western musicians express themselves and produce music, but what greater purpose does this music fulfill if it separates people, rich from poor, the very people sitting next to each other for all 3 hours of a concert, rather than bring people together? The music and the musician are self-indulgent, more concerned with their individual expression than with what humanity needs and what ties humanity together. And Du Bois asks,